And welcome again to another webcast of A Mirror Darkly, Unbridled Inquiry. Last week we were gone. We were at Knott's Berry Farm with Daryl, our friend from college. He comes out each week, or each year, at this time of the year for his vacation. And his vacation consists of staying with us and taking us to movies, taking us out to dinner, and going to Knott's Berry Farm.
And buying treats, of which I'm having one.
Yes. He was here for the Labor Day party on Monday. So, today's episode is on freedom of speech, or free speech. And one would not think that this would be particularly controversial in the United States.
Or even a topic that you need to discuss.
Or even a topic that you need to discuss. But just today, I was reading the LA or was it? Anyway, I was reading someplace, I don't recall where now. One of the writers, a noted novelist, was forced to resign from a show that he was writing for. He's African American. And he was telling a story that he was aware of. They'd heard from a police officer in Chicago years ago. And he made use of the N-word in telling the story because that was part of what the police officer had told him. So he's quoting the police officer's words. And he was forced to leave because he had used the N-word in the writer's room at this place. It got reported to HR and off he goes, which is utterly ludicrous from my point of view. Now, several years ago, there was a writer for Friends who happened to be a Christian, and she got offended by some of the discussions going on in the writer's room of Friends because, you know, it's sexually oriented and all that sort of thing. And
I had no idea about this story.
And I was thinking to myself when I read the story, had you ever watched Friends before? That you would be writing. You know, what did you expect? Thankfully, her lawsuit was thrown out because it was fundamentally unreasonable for her to be offended by the language and situations that they discussed in the writer's room, because that's part of free expression and writing and what you have to do in order to get together.
Generate
ideas. And so it was stupid, but things have changed. This was probably 10 years ago. Apparently,
Well, it'll be longer than that ago because Friends is celebrating 25.
Oh, okay.
Its
So
25th anniversary.
It's been 25 years ago. We
years.
now live in an era where people are wanting to constantly ban all sorts of words. I'm reminded of a comic who is now dead that everybody knows the name of, George Carlin.
Oh.
And he made himself famous by doing what?
By saying the, 10 words you're not allowed to say on TV.
Seven words you can.
Seven.
7 words you can never say on television.
Yes.
And he went through them all in
Yes,
his
I
act.
read them all.
I will read them now because we're not on.
That's true. We're not on television.
We're not on television. We can use these words. Of course, television actually uses some of these words now.
They do.
Yes. And what's interesting too, I'll go ahead and read through them. There's one of these words that shows up more than once in the King James Version of the Bible.
Oh, okay. I know what word it is. It begins with the P.
Yes, it does. Okay, these are the 7 words that you are not allowed to say on television during the time of George Carlin. This was in 1972 that he did this.
I bet the B word's on there because you're allowed to say it now. Probably wasn't then.
Well, the words are shit, piss, fuck, cunt, cocksucker, motherfucker, and tits.
Ah, okay.
So-
Well, some of those words are okay now on television.
Yeah, some of these words are okay out now on television. Piss certainly is, and piss is the word that shows up in King James Version of the Bible more than once, plus verb forms of it.
That would be pisseth.
Yes. For those of you that suddenly you'll be looking at your Strong's Concordance to find it, have fun. But yes, I'm always amused by KJV only people that will tell me that the language of the King James Bible is so much more refined and uplifting and modern English, and I'm thinking, yes, modern translations use the word urine. King James Version used piss. Oh, wow. But it's an interesting thing that people are offended by certain words. Now, from a Christian standpoint, this is particularly odd because you will look without success in going through the Bible to find a list of words that are forbidden, that thou shalt not say. That is, none of the Ten Commandments are, thou shalt not say these words. It just doesn't come up. It's not really an issue of discussion. I've had people quote a particular passage in Ephesians about not using coarse and vulgar language and say, well, see, that's what it's talking about. And that was written by Paul. And then I'm reminded that in Galatians, Paul had interesting words for those that were part of the circumcision group. And he commented that he wished they would go the whole way and emasculate themselves, which would seem rather coarse and crude.
Yes.
Anyway.
So I wonder what counts as coarse and crude
Plus
language.
also, as I've pointed out before,
Or do you think it's culturally established?
I think it's a matter of, okay, remember the core value of the Bible, the
Love God and love people.
love God and love people. And I think that's the issue in what Paul is expressing here. That is, you don't want to treat one another that way. You don't want to use words that are going to be offensive or mean in that respect. You want to try to avoid that. Because the other problem with trying to make it certain words is if you look at it, and the problem is I can read Hebrew, and so that creates added problems for me. Because I know things that people think are so that just aren't so. And so if you look at Ezekiel chapter 16 and chapter 23, which I've mentioned before to much hilarity in church, and rolling of eyes from people that know what I'm talking about, and the fact I keep saying it over and over again, and now I'm doing it here. Ezekiel 16:23, years ago in a Society of Biblical Literature meeting, there was a paper given on the pornography of Ezekiel on those two chapters. And those two chapters, Ezekiel very explicitly and graphically compares Judah and Israel to prostitutes. And he uses language that is coarse and vulgar. And quite frankly, if you were to translate it accurately from Hebrew into English, you would have to use the F word on occasion. It's at that level of coarseness. Some of it, if you read the chapters, you'll find that there's no way of avoiding being coarse and crude. You have one section where it says that Israel spreads her legs for everybody that walks by. It's rather coarse and crude and explicit.
But it's talking about idolatry.
No, it's talking about idolatry.
Right. Anytime that that is used in that sense, it's meaning
That is, the
idolatry.
point that Ezekiel was making was that Israel and Judah, by chasing after other gods, were acting like adulteresses rather than being faithful to the one God. They were having affairs with everybody and his neighbor. And so he was expressing the unpleasantness of that as crudely as possible to make his point. So it's not pornography. But the paper's title was designed to get people to actually show up at the
And to read,
and to read the
his
paper.
stuff, yeah.
So anyway, one tries
Well,
to
it's
be
like that, the book by Steve Martin that I have, Cruel Shoes, the one chapter in it is called Sex Crazed Love Goddesses, and it's about some little boy whose mom sends him to the post office to buy stamps, and that's literally all the story's about.
Yeah.
But it makes you read it, and you're like reading it and like, where are the sex crazed love goddesses? And there aren't any. It's all about going and buying stamps and obeying your mother.
Yeah. So, anyway, freedom of speech. You have people that are easily offended on all ends of the political spectrum, all sorts of religious groups, by language. And of course, it's always been that way. People are easily offended by words or by ideas that they don't like. I read somebody's post on Facebook today. It was a political post. And she posted this article and said, I don't want to hear a word. And I thought, okay, fine, I won't say a thing.
Just type a word.
Yeah,
Just
no,
a word.
yeah, but it's just that seems to be oftentimes the attitude that I want to express my opinion, but don't you dare say anything about it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, fine. That's not really the way it's supposed to work. But the difficulty, of course, is that when it comes to politics, it's very difficult to have any kind of reasoned discussions anymore.
Well, and Facebook is not
And Facebook's not set up for it.
right. It's not set up to be a place of intellectual discussion.
Absolutely not.
It's anything but. So, like when I have posted things and somebody's turned it into a controversy, that I will read the comments, and if there's anything reasonable, I'll respond to it. But then when they start going off, and just being mean,
Yes.
I drop out of the conversation. So if you ever watch one of my threads, you'll see I've said something, somebody responds, I may or may not have responded to them, I may like it, or I may respond to it with actual words. And then eventually you don't see me anymore because I drop out of the conversation because it's just become absurd.
Yeah.
And I don't have time for that.
Yeah, I've gotten to the place now that even when I see posts that have factual errors or that are crackpot laden, I will resist the urge now to respond even to those sorts of things because it has become pointless.
Yeah. I have some
So
friends.
I've got some friends that'll post anti-Semitic things on occasion. I've pointed it out to them, and they seem to be oblivious to the fact that it's anti-Semitic, and so I've gotten to where I just don't even bother anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And they'll do other conspiracy-laden stuff, and again, it just becomes, there's no point because they're not willing to engage in any kind of conversation. They just attack, and it's like, okay, this is not useful. And my attitude towards reacting to something is on whether or not I will react to something is whether or not I feel like it's going to be useful or
Right.
achieve any purpose.
I have a few friends that react super negatively to anything that is like, unless I say, oh, I'm dog sitting my granddog today. I mean, they don't respond to all of that stuff. The only thing they respond to is stuff that I put up that could anyway be considered controversial, like by any stretch of the imagination. So they don't respond to
Some people will
any.
stretch their imaginations to make something controversial,
Right.
even if it's
Well-
not intended to be. It's like what I will post mostly and what I follow mostly on Facebook is like the SpaceX group and some other space-related things. And the SpaceX group is particularly well moderated, and they will hammer down really hard on anybody that ever brings any political stuff into it. But it's remarkable to see people dragging politics into things. It's like, how did you do that?
Well, my rule is if you don't respond to anything that I put up except those things, whether it's about what I believe, like my faith or my politics, anything like that, and I'm really super careful about what I post. But if you don't respond to anything else I put except that, what I do is when I go to make the post, I do the accept thing where it's like all my friends except for these people, and I just block them from the outset because they don't ever like my pictures of my dog. They don't ever comment on the dinner I've had or that I'm out with my family or my massive number of Snapchat uploads. Anything fun or personal I'm doing, they never respond to that. It's almost like they're trolling my Facebook page, and when they see something they can latch onto. So I just don't even let those people see it. You're
No,
not
I don't.
interested in my life. You don't need to know what I think.
I don't think they're trolling. I think what it is that there are some people that politics seems to be the only thing they think about all the time. And so that's the only thing they're interested in. It's the only thing they care about. It's the only thing that gets them going. And so if they see something that's political or that they can twist in a political way, that's what they're going to respond
Okay,
to.
that's a good perspective on it. But now these same people I respond to their personal life stuff. They go on
Yeah,
vacation.
well, that's
I say I
because
like
you're
it.
more
or,
interested in that than you are on politics.
Right.
I mean,
Well, and
people
I'm
would be a
interested
lot
in
happier if they didn't.
everything that people are interested in. I mean, and if they put up something political, I'll read it. If I don't agree with it, I just keep scrolling. If I agree with it or if I find it interesting, I'll like it or something like that. But I generally don't get stuck in the weeds with stuff like that.
Yeah.
I love that word, that term, getting stuck in the weeds.
Yeah. I was reading an article by Kat Timpf. She's a columnist on National Review Online. She's a libertarian. And her article was, "I'm the target of hatred and I'll still defend it as free speech." And I think it's a valuable article in that regard, that she lists some of the rather vitriolic responses she's gotten from people, telling her that she needs to die, or that she's a Nazi, or that she's a communist, or it
And that's
varies
really horrible. And that
just
shows
horrible sorts of things. But yet she says, and she's right, is that people should be able to say that.
right.
I mean, it's unkind. You would wish people be more polite, more reasoned
Well, and it really
in their
shows they're
discussion.
stupid too, because if that's
Well-
all you have to say, if you say something I
Well, that's-
disagree with and I call you a Nazi, it's because I don't have real reasons to disagree with you.
Well,
I'm
that's-
kind of an idiot.
I'm trying to remember the name of the law, but anyway, anytime somebody goes to that level, that means they've lost the argument. Is when you start invoking Hitler or Nazis, you've gone off the deep end. What's the name of that? Grimm's Law? Grissom's Law? Something like that. It's something came out on the internet several years ago, and it's been a thing for a while, but I can't remember the name of the law. But yeah, if you go to that level, you've lost the argument because you become unreasoned at that point. It's name calling.
Yeah.
And
Well, and it's like the schoolyard.
Yeah,
you know,
it is
third
schoolyard.
graders do that. I called him stupid. Well, why'd you call him stupid? Because he wrote on my paper. It's like, well, don't call him stupid. If you can't solve the problem, ask an adult for help. And that's what I would tell you. If you're resorting to calling someone a Nazi, raise your hand and ask an adult for help.
Yes.
That's probably a good rule for most people, even if you're not in third grade
Yes.
anymore.
Yeah. As if you're reduced to name calling of whatever sort, as you're calling them this or that or the other, you might want to step back a moment and think, perhaps I've gone too far. I've jumped the shark. Nevertheless, what she has to say in this article is important, because people should be free to say the most vile things. I've told the story before about, I can't remember the name of the president. I think it's Grover Cleveland. No, it wasn't Grover Cleveland. I think it was Herbert Hoover. Anyway, he was at dinner with his family, and his 12-year-old popped off and told him, "Go fuck yourself." And his wife was flabbergasted and appalled and was looking at her husband, "Do something about this. Why are you just sitting there?" And Herbert Hoover very carefully said, "Well, I was contemplating the ramifications of this. If he is addressing me as the President of the United States, then he's well within his rights to say that. If he's doing that as his father, then I'm going to have to spank him."
Wash his mouth.
Yeah, so is it a constitutional issue, or is
Right.
it, is it freedom of speech, or is he just...
But the people that say to go kill yourself or something like that, that's actually encouraging something dangerous, and that is a limitation on free speech. Like,
Well, advocating violence, but it's even there, you've got some lines. So, for instance, you tell somebody to go kill themselves, that's really it's not a threat. That is, you've told them, it's like telling somebody to go F themselves. It's in that level of thing, it's bad.
we live in a time where people have it's been said to them enough that some of them do.
Yeah, and that's
at
bullying.
least attempt. And then you could be held accountable for it. So I would be super careful about
Yeah.
saying something like
Well,
that.
it's like, you can't in a crowded theater shout fire. That is, there are limitations of that sort. That is, if you're actually advocating violence against someone, if you were to shout fire in a crowded theater, those sorts of things you really not permitted to say, and you can get in trouble for it. But outside of a very narrow controlling thing, you're free to say anything that you feel like saying. You can publish anything that you feel like publishing. Likewise, people can ignore you.
Or they can
respond to you.
Respond with speech.
And that's the other thing. You can't tell someone, well, you can tell them that, but they will and should ignore you if you tell them to shut the F up. It is what's the initials? STFU. STFU is not, again, you're at that level, you're losing the argument.
Right.
It is telling someone you don't want to hear a response, telling someone shut the F up, telling somebody to sit down because of their white privilege or whatever. Again, you've lost the argument. Those are not rational responses. Certainly you're free to say those sorts of things. And that's the other aspect of all of this. Freedom of speech allows you to say anything at all that you want. The question that you have to ask yourself as a rational human being, and if you're a Christian, someone that should be motivated by love, does it fit into those categories? But yes, we are free to say anything at all. And it's interesting that people can be forced out of jobs based on something they say or something they think or something they believe. That sort of thing makes me uncomfortable as a libertarian-leaning person and a member of the American civilization. That is, our general approach to things is that people should be free to say, think, do pretty much anything they want, as long as it doesn't infringe on somebody's else's rights. And people talk about it used to be sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me. But now you have people talking about words being violent, and I don't think that that's really correct. That is, there is a difference between punching someone in the nose and telling someone to go F themselves. That's not the same thing. Certainly you don't want to have somebody say something mean to you, but that's something that we as a society and as the Constitution is written have decided is a good thing, and it is a good idea, because the best counter to speech that you don't like or words that you don't like is more speech and more words. That is, it's not something that we should have to try to restrict.
So I have a question. If you don't want to go there because it's somewhat of a political hot potato, I know we're kind of staying away from that kind of stuff. So what do you think about...
The reason we want to stay away from it is because if we take a particular political point of view, then that is, you immediately and reason.
Okay.
That is, when you bring in politics, just like if you bring in sports sometimes, reason goes out the window.
Right.
That is, there are some sports fans, for instance, that are so rabid that they can't actually see that their team has played badly. It's all the ref's fault or something else. And I don't really understand that level of thinking. That is, I watch the Dodgers, and if the Dodgers lose like they did last night to the Giants, which is a horrible tragedy, the reason they lost is because they did not play so well.
It wasn't because the umpire was blind?
It's not because the umpire was blind, it's because they didn't play so well. Why didn't they play so well? That's the puzzle.
Okay.
So, because they are the first place team with the best record in baseball, and the Giants are in the toilet, and why the Giants should have been able to beat them makes no sense. Anyway, but yeah, bringing in politics is something I prefer not to do, because once you bring in a political point of view, then everybody that's on the other side suddenly has lost their minds, they've shut down. And so it's not useful.
All right, I'm going to ask the question.
Okay.
And you tell me if you want to address it or not.
Okay.
Okay, so things like YouTube demonetizing speech that they don't
Well, that
agree with.
when you talk about a commercial enterprise,
That's what I'm thinking.
that is, newspapers are not obligated to publish your screed that you have written to them, whether it's your letter or a proposed article. That is, they can choose to publish it or not. I've figured out how to get my letters to the editor published about 80% of the time because I know what they're looking for and how to do it in such a way that they'll be happy with it, even if it's against what they generally think. You can do it. But that being said, again, a newspaper, they can choose to publish or not publish something. It's entirely up to them. And the question with YouTube or Facebook and why people feel funny about it is because obviously if you're talking to somebody on the telephone company is not going to shut you down because you said something that they don't like. Telephones don't work that way. And some people imagine somehow that Facebook or Google, who owns YouTube, is like the telephone company. And in some respects, the law kind of treats them that way, but in other respects, not. And quite frankly, being a commercial company, they do have the right to decide what they will and will not allow on their platforms.
Right. And that's kind of how I feel about it. But I think that there's the power of the dollar, and there is the power of listening, even though the person's been demonetized. And there's ways you can still contribute financially to them if you feel so inclined.
Right.
So I think that that's better than, saying that, Google's evil because
Yeah, I don't
of
see it
or
as evil
whatever.
because, again, they're a private company. They can do pretty much whatever they want with it. And actually, thinking in terms of freedom and how that works, they actually should have that freedom because, you go to most businesses, or a lot of businesses, you'll see a little sign on the wall that says, "We reserve the right to refuse service to anyone." That should be something a business can do. They can decide for whatever reason, stupid or not, we don't serve your kind here. Go away. And you really shouldn't have any recourse. That is, they
Right.
should, as a bit. It's foolish, I think, for a business to exclude people that would give them money. But ideally, that's used to get rid of people that are causing disruption or interfering with
Right.
their being able to conduct their business. I think it's foolish for any company to say, well, we don't like this particular idea, or we don't like whatever it is about you, so take your money with you. Why would you do that
Right.
as a business? That's weird.
So-
And so that strikes me as a little weird from the standpoint of YouTube or whatever, although you do have, as the owner of a company like YouTube, I would be uncomfortable hosting someone that is spewing anti-Semitic venom. So, or I'd be uncomfortable hosting someone that is an anti-vaxxer or someone that's against GMOs. I wouldn't go along with, I wouldn't like that. And so I wouldn't want to host that. And so they should have the right that they can exclude what it is they don't like. We can complain about it because we, again, have freedom of speech. We can react to what they've done,
Right.
but they can do what they want.
Right. Okay, that's kind of what I thought you were going to say. Okay, so Tim Church is watching, and he said that our thing about people commenting on Facebook and things like that reminds him of two scriptures. I looked up one. I'll look up the next one in a second. Proverbs 26:4-5. Do not answer a fool according to his folly, or you yourself will be just like him. Answer a fool according to his folly, or he will be wise in his own eyes.
I like to bring that one up because the two verses contradict each other.
Yes.
But of course they do that on purpose because the point is you're damned if you do and you're damned if you
Right.
don't. That's what it's trying to say. No
So-
matter how you react to a fool, you're going to get yourself in trouble.
Right, and so that's why I choose not to respond to those people that
Right.
I consider to be fools in that
Or
respect.
at least acting as a fool at that moment. They
Right.
may not normally be fools, but for whatever reason they've allowed their passion on a particular topic to overwhelm their
And what
reason.
in a situation like that, like on Facebook, and it's usually over political stuff because
Yes,
that's
it
what's
is.
the
Although
big
I
thing right
also
now.
see it with other things
Right.
that bother me.
But if the person is completely unwilling to say, okay, that might be a thing, if they're completely shut down to any other possibilities, that's a fool. I don't respond to them. Or I block them from the post anyway. I have certain friends that they believe what they believe, and they're not going to be, they are not open-minded as much as they claim they are open-minded. They are not. So I don't entertain them. I mean, because when somebody poses something to me, I think to myself, well, I wonder if that's like a thing. So I think about it. I'll usually talk to you because you're really well read, and I don't have time to read that much. I mean, I do read, but not that much. And so I'll usually bounce it off of you. Then I will come to my own conclusion after that. But I consider the other person's viewpoint. But some people, it doesn't matter what you say.
Well, what happens is some people get to the place in their thinking that anyone who disagrees with their point of view is by definition evil. And so if the other person is by definition evil, then why should I engage in any kind of discussion with them? And that's where a lot of people get to in certain views. It is, it's like with the KJV only people. If you do not agree with them, then you then are automatically part of the conspiracy that is trying to destroy the Bible, and therefore you're evil, and therefore we don't have to listen to you and go away, drop dead, whatever. And so there can be no discussion at all.
Right.
And they're not going to listen to anything that you bring because they've already excluded you and anything that you have to say into the category of stuff that is automatically wrong. And not just wrong, but vile, evil, disgusting, should be stomped out, we should punch you in the face, whatever. And yeah, it's very sad that that happens.
Okay, so the other scripture that he brought up was 1 Peter 2:16. Live as free people, but not use your freedom as a cover-up for evil. Live as God's slaves. And then I would go on to the next one. Show proper respect to everyone. Love the family of believers. Fear God. Honor the emperor.
Yeah. Well, see, one of the problems, and this is an important aspect of how we interact with people. I mean, you have the explicit biblical statement to love your neighbor as yourself. One of the difficulties that we have in that is recognizing, and this is something that Proverbs says in chapter 16 of Proverbs, that whatever a person does is right in their own eyes. That is, people generally speaking, even the most horrible people that have done horrible things, at the moment they're doing whatever they're doing, or at the moment they're saying whatever they're saying, they are not thinking that what they are doing or saying is bad. That is, they feel justified, they have their reasons for saying whatever they say.
That's why Dr. Phil will say to people, what were you saying to yourself when you were doing this?
Right.
When they do something that seems kind of
Weird.
odd, or he'll ask them that. And that's exactly, and I'll ask my students that. I'll go, what did you say to yourself that made that okay? And they're third graders. They don't have that much insight. They're like, I don't know, because I want them to think about it.
Yeah, well, a lot of people don't have a lot of insight.
But usually, like, I know that when I am eating something that is going to cause me to gain weight, I've justified it in my own mind before I take a bite. It's like, well, I deserve this. I had a hard week.
Yes.
Okay.
Go
Eating
for it.
chocolate cupcakes. There you go, my friend.
Yeah. So, but it would be nice if we could always attribute to the other person humanity. That is, allow the possibility that the other person is doing or saying or believing what they believe for reasons that they think are good. It's like the story about Napoleon Bonaparte. Jerry Pournelle told the story. It's where I first heard about it, and I've heard it from other places since. That he got a report about one of his generals that the battle had gone really badly and everything had gone wrong, and some of his advisors telling him obviously the general has to have become a turncoat, he's a traitor. And Napoleon thought a moment and said, no, it's better to attribute it's better to attribute I'm screwing up don't attribute to malice what is more easily explained by stupidity and incompetence.
So that's when people drive poorly on the street. I'm like, come on, you idiot. Because I don't think they're being malicious. I think they're being stupid, and it's their natural state.
Yes. Generally speaking, if somebody does something boneheaded, it's not because they're trying to be malicious or because they hate you. It's because they're stupid at that moment. They've made an error.
A poor choice.
A poor choice.
That's what we call it in third grade. We
Yes,
call
they
it
made
a poor choice.
But we should allow people the opportunity to make mistakes. There was another article I read, and I thought this was insightful. It is, there's a tendency, particularly in the modern political climate, that people are not allowed to ever do anything that is outside absolute correct behavior all times, always the right words, never the wrong words. Because, St. Augustine said, hate the sin, love the sinner. The modern point of view is hate the sinner because of the sin. Mm-hmm. And forgiveness is never allowed. That is, if you have stepped outside the realm of what is allowable, then you are forever and always to be a pariah. Mm-hmm. I do not think that Nathaniel Hawthorne's novel, The Scarlet Letter, was designed to be a how-to manual. But that seems to be the way it is being treated nowadays. That is, people can, as a high schooler or years ago, do something that we look at now and say, what were you thinking? Mm-hmm. And if that comes out, or if they mine your ancient tweets, then you will forever and always be labeled as this sort of person, and you can never make amends, and you can never get right again, and you will always be in trouble.
Yeah. Well,
we will make sure that you can't have a job, and we'll make sure you live in a gutter, and on and on.
Well,
and on.
I will ingest with people. They'll say something, and I'll say, "Oh, don't ever try to become a Supreme Court justice now."
Yeah.
Because, and even though he obviously didn't do those things,
yes.
there are people that believe he did and got away with it now.
Right.
But, even if you did that at 18, if you haven't done it till now and you're like in your 50s or 60s,
then who cares?
Then, yeah,
pretty much.
Who cares?
There should be a statute of limitations, if nothing else. It's been 20 years since this thing happened. Mm-hmm. Who cares now?
Yeah. You've not done it since.
You've not done it since, so okay.
Yeah. It's not like a pattern of behavior.
Everybody makes errors.
Yeah, and I was a pretty good kid, but I would not want my, teenage years replayed for anybody, even though I didn't really do anything wrong. Mm-hmm. It's just you do stupid things when you're a teenager, but you don't have a frontal lobe. You have a non-functioning frontal lobe, and that's your executive function. And I raised my children knowing they have no frontal lobe. That's mommy and daddy's job until you're at least 25. And it's funny because I would tell them things like, you can't see around corners. One day one of our daughters asked me, Mom, do you really see what's around that corner? Thinking that she thought I literally saw around corners. So that was pretty amusing. And then I had to explain to her what the idiom meant.
Yeah, I grew up my high school years were college years were in the 70s. 70s were the ugliest of decades as far as clothing styles and everything.
Which you were still wearing in the 80s, I will add.
Yes, but thankfully I don't think there's no photographic evidence of any of this.
There's some.
There is?
Yeah, there are some pictures out there of your plaid pants.
Uh-oh. I was hoping
Not many, but they're there. I've seen them.
Really?
Yeah.
Are you sure? Are you sure they still exist?
Yeah, to get rid of them. Burn them. That's what you're burning the fireplace. It's 105 degrees and he's running the fireplace. Now I know why.
Burning old photos of my bad fashion sense. Well, fashion sense was never good.
Yeah, it's not good. You just have a wife and daughters now.
Yes, there were people that made me change how I...
Well, he'll have holes in his shirts and he'll wear it to preach in, and I'll be like, do not wear the shirt again. Why? It's a perfectly good shirt. No, it's got holes in it.
Where?
Well, it's only a few. So, no. And I even taught Brittany, because was it your socks she found that had holes
Well,
in
you
them?
can't see the
Does
socks.
not matter. Socks don't have escape
I have
hatches.
shoes on. You can't see the socks.
You guys are about to see a husband and wife fight. Okay, this is how we fight. Okay, so I taught Brittany that when she sees your socks with holes in them, to cut them up and throw them in the trash because you'll rescue them, wash them, and wear them.
This is not a safe space for my sartorial sex.
No, there are no safe spaces in your life, honey.
Safe
you have
space
daughters
is the
and a wife.
stupidest idea.
Yes, it is. But I know very close people to me that have to honor safe spaces because it's their job. But I can't say who because I want to get the person in trouble.
Okay.
But anyway, and that's unfortunate. I can't say who because that person could potentially lose their job. It's really stupid.
Yes, it is.
But anyway, but about the clothing thing, when we were first married and we lived in our apartment in Canyon Country, I'll never forget this. I had thrown away a shirt of his that was not fit for wearing.
It was a good shirt.
I don't
There's
remember if
nothing
it was
wrong with
ripped
it.
or if it was.
You just didn't like it.
I don't remember. Anyway, so I threw it in the trash, and then he's wearing it. I'm like, I threw that in the trash. Now he's wearing it. So I found a permanent marker, and I wrote on the back of it, "Kick me hard," and I threw it back in the trash. He's like, "You ruined my perfectly good shirt." I said, "No, I prevented you from wearing a bad shirt." It was, I don't remember if it had holes in it or if it was just like way out of style, but
Probably way out of style.
I have saved him from himself for over 36 years. 36 years of marriage. Actually, I'll tell this story too. So when we were dating,
Freedom of speech is overrated.
I'm about to get demonetized by my husband. But we were dating, and I used to go over to his house like when class was over, or when I didn't have classes, and I would make dinner for him and his roommates and stuff, and we'd hang out. And so I forget, I think it might have been Kayleen and I, but we decided to go through your closet and clean out your ugly clothes.
Yes, I
So
remember I
you
came home one day and I had no clothes anymore.
Well, here's what happened. He probably doesn't remember the whole story.
No,
'cause
I
he
don't,
doesn't.
but I remember
He
the fact
comes
I came home and had no
and we
clothes.
were going out on a date that night. He goes, "What do we do? What do you want to do tonight?" And I said, "Well, I think we should go clothes shopping." He said, "Oh, you need clothes?" I said, "No, you do." He's like, "I've got plenty of clothes." I'm like, "No, you don't. Go look in your closet." He opened up his closet. He was bereft of clothing. He would have to be naked for half the week. So to prevent that atrocity from happening, we went clothes shopping. And it was like $100 he spent, which then was like a considerably
considerable
more
amount.
amount of money than it is now.
Yeah, this was
and we were
early-
making
this was the
considerably
early
less.
80s.
Yeah, so we
Yeah.
were making considerably less. But he was like, "That was a wasted $100." I go, "No, now you've got some nice clothes." I mean,
I had
I bought
clothes.
him
I
his
didn't need
first
clothes.
pair of jeans. He'd never owned a pair of jeans
That's
before.
not true. I had jeans growing up. I just didn't have them at that point.
He had these awful plaid polyester pants.
Well,
It
they
was
were in
sad
style at
and
the time.
horrific. So, Tim goes,
But-
"I'm surprised he didn't wear that shirt anyway." No, he knew better, Tim. He knew it was
Well, I
better
didn't
to
wanna
have a
wear
wife than
shirts
to be
with
alone
stupid
again.
words on the back.
And he didn't want to be a bachelor again.
No, I didn't want people kicking me. Very practical.
This is probably the most fun we've had doing this webcast.
No, we've had fun before. You're having the most fun.
I think that we should do How to Stay Married for 36 Years webcast. I do. Because I think people would find us
I
highly
think they'd
amusing.
turn in for that. Yeah.
Yes. They'd be like, if that's what it's like, I'm never getting married. So,
Oh dear. But, yeah, freedom of speech should not be controversial. We should, after 250 years of this as a nation, be pretty used to the idea that people can say any kind of stupid thing they want, and who cares?
well, I think the example of you when you
Who
went to
cares?
UCLA, and I experienced it too. He would go to class, and I would go hang out down there, and I'd walk around 'cause it's a beautiful campus, which is shocking because it's the public university, and the private university is in the worst neighborhood in the planet. But anyway,
Yeah,
we won't
UCLA is
mention it.
close to Beverly Hills.
Yes. So anyway, so I go wander around while he was in class, and I get coffee, and I'd sit on a bench and watch people walk by. But you walk through, it has these huge walking areas, and there would be people standing on benches pontificating about something, and they'd have flyers and they'd want you to hear what they were saying, and it was all, well, for lack of a better word, bullshit, most of it. So you just walk by, and people would walk by. There would be some people that might engage them in conversation or ask them questions or take their flyer.
Listen or whatever.
Or listen, but most people just walked by and nobody cared.
Right.
Now, at a lot of universities, you cannot do that. If you have an opinion that people don't like, I mean, people have been attacked on the campuses for saying things that people don't like, and it's really unfortunate.
Yeah, it's very odd.
Yes, because the university should be where free speech is most treasured and where you can have that exchange of ideas. And because really that's where new ideas come from. You were explaining that, this thing with ideas. What's that, Heisenberg principle?
No.
Heidelberg?
Hegel.
Hegel. What?
Hegel.
Okay.
Hegelian dialectics.
There you go. I knew it was 2 words. Heisen.
Yes.
What's Heisenberg?
Well, Werner Heisenberg was a physicist, and he's famous for the uncertainty principle.
Okay.
That is, you can know where
I
something...
missed it by that
Yeah, when it
much.
comes to subatomic particles, you can know where it is, or you can know its velocity, but you can't know both at the same time.
Okay.
Which seems weird, but the math is quite clear.
Okay.
It's kind of like
But
trying to make
that's not
one
what I'm
equals
talking
zero.
about.
No, Hegelian dialectics.
There we go.
Hegel said that the way ideas go is you'll have an idea that'll come along, and then you have a reaction to the idea. And then there's lots of discussion for a while, and then you'll have synthesis. Things will come together, and you'll have consensus. And then a new idea will come along to oppose it. The same thing, it just keeps going like that. Idea, anti-idea, synthesis, on and on, forever. There's no end to it.
Right.
Karl Marx took that and tried to use that for economics, and he had an ending then at the communist state. But of course, Hegelian dialectics doesn't work that way. But anyway, that's...
Well, and now kind of what we have is like idea, anti-idea, idea, anti-idea. There's no synthesis.
Well, there is eventually. I mean, you can have... And the other thing, too, that is people talk about, the lack of civility and all of that. What we're seeing in the modern world with the argument and all this stuff that goes on, it actually is good evidence for the fact that free speech is quite healthy and doing well, because everybody's yelling at each other. And nobody can actually prevent everybody from yelling at each other. And even when people tell you to STFU, people keep on going. That is, every idea, every concept is always going out there. That is, if YouTube tries to ban something, or Google tries to, or YouTube, whatever, it still gets out. Because the internet is such a wide open place that you can always get your ideas out one way or another. You can't control it. You can't stop it. And people have always argued this way. We were actually far more civil in our discourse than we were in earlier periods of our history. One of the sad errors that people have is a lack of perspective and a lack of historical knowledge. Now, this is both a good and a bad thing in the United States. Our historical illiteracy is actually useful in some respects because we don't have long memories of things that are wrong. Somebody has wronged us, but we get over it pretty quickly. That is, World War II wasn't that long ago, but we're good friends with Germany and Japan. Certainly wasn't that way in the 1940s. We got over it. You go to some places in Europe and something that's happened 600 years ago, it's still festering and causing bitterness and problems in that community. The United States doesn't have that. But historical literacy would be useful in the sense of being able to get some perspective on modern attitudes and approaches. That is, if you look at, say, the campaign between Adams and Jefferson, which was, Adams was the second president. Jefferson became the third. The name calling, the accusations, I mean, it was nothing compared to what we see today at all. The treasurer of the United States was murdered by the vice president.
Yeah. Did the vice president go to prison?
No.
No?
That is Aaron Burr.
Did he have executive privilege?
No, he ran away.
Oh, okay. There's always that.
He ran off to Mexico.
Okay.
But I mean, you have that level of
funny.
violence where people shoot each other. Andrew Jackson was noted for several of the duels he got into, one over his wife's honor. You had one abolitionist that was nearly beaten to death by somebody else in Congress. There's one congressman beating the other congressman with his cane until he was hospitalized. You don't see that sort of thing anymore. So, things are not nearly as violent as they used to be. So perspective is a useful thing, which most people don't have. They don't see how things used to be. And so they have they'll say this is the worst it's ever been. Well, no, it's not if you actually studied history. This is nothing compared to what we've seen in the past.
Well, my students and I would be
And these arguments over what is permitted speech and not permitted speech, this is something that's been ongoing since the beginning. And there have been periods of time. No, I'm not going to yet. There have been periods of no free speech for you.
This is me being demonetized, just saying.
No, go ahead. Sorry.
Well, two things. Right now I'm teaching my third graders about rights and responsibilities, and we're talking about freedom of speech. And I told them, until you're 18, you don't really have your full rights, because you can't tell your parents what you think. Or, if you're... And
if you're 12-year-old and you tell your father who happens to be president of the United States... Because he's your father, he's going to whip you.
Yeah. So, and I've told them things like freedom of religion. You, as a child, don't have freedom of religion. You kind of have to do what your parents say. But when you become 18, you can do what you want. So anyway, we've talked about that. We've also talked about the responsibilities of citizens, and that is to know who you're going to vote for. That you can't. Your freedom of speech is limited by telling somebody something dangerous. And then there was something else I was going to say when I was rudely interrupting you, and now I forgot what it was. So there you go. So Jolene and Tim think that I'm funny, though.
Yes, you are
no,
funny.
Jolene said Ruth always has more fun than anyone, and Tim said yes.
Yes.
So.
Well, you are very funny.
Oh, thank you.
Yes.
But I can't remember what I was going to say.
I don't remember what I was going to say either, so we have completely
Okay, so we're
up.
Officially both old.
Apparently. Well, we got distracted.
We're talking about free speech.
We went upstairs, and now we can't remember why we were there.
We went up there. So let's go back downstairs and see if we can figure out why we went up there.
And dead airspace is never good on a...
Yeah. So actually, we're really close to being done.
Yes, we are close to done.
Dangerously close.
Yes.
But,
yes, historical perspective would be useful. People would have that and not always think that this is the worst thing that has ever happened in the history of mankind. Also, wider understanding of what the history of the rest of the world has been would be useful too, because the United States is not the source for all the evil that has occurred in the world, nor are we worse than the rest of the world. In many respects, we're much better. I mean, one of the primary differences between the U.S. and the rest of the world is simply the fact that we have the ideals. They're enshrined in our Constitution.
Well, when we know better, we do better, which is one of my favorite quotes, and it's by, now her name went out of my head, very
Yes,
famous black poet, female. Shoot.
Angelou?
Yeah, Maya Angelou. When you know better, you do better. It's
Yes.
on all my email signatures for work. And, people try to judge the past based on our current standards. But the thing is, okay, for example, I had a friend that was trying to dethrone or defrock, however you want to call it, George Washington, saying he was a vile person because he was a slave owner. Well, the thing is that at that time, Slavery was not the big issue because we were trying to gain our independence from England. That was the critical issue.
The other critical thing to understand, too, and this is what gets lost, is the United States was not the only country that had slaves.
Right. Well,
Human beings have enslaved one another since as far back as we can go, and the rest of the world was enslaving people.
Right.
And it wasn't just Africans that were enslaved. That is, they were simply available.
But there were even white people that were slaves too.
Everybody has
because
been
indentured
slaves.
servants being brought over.
We enslaved Native Americans. We enslaved Africans. In Europe, before they started enslaving Africans, they enslaved one another, and so on.
They enslaved the peasants, the rich people.
Everybody
owned the
enslaved.
peasants,
Yeah,
right?
human beings are vile.
Yes.
That's the bottom line.
Not just American humans.
Yes, human beings
But-
are vile. This is why Jesus had to come and die for our sins, is because we were vile, and we couldn't fix ourselves.
But her point was because he was a slave owner, we should disregard anything he ever did that was good when that wasn't. And then there's an argument being made that at that same time, and I don't know if this is historically accurate, you probably know, that at that time England was moving away from slavery. They were trying to get rid of slavery in their own country.
Well, you had movements in the North anyway and elsewhere in the U.S. against slavery. It wasn't just unique to England. England did outlaw the slave trade and then outlawed
About what year
slavery.
was that it?
It was Wilberforce and is in the early 1800s.
Oh, so it wasn't that close to the revolution.
No, it was after the Revolution that they outlawed the slave trade. And
Well,
of course,
maybe they were moving away
And the
from it at
U.S.
that
outlawed
point.
the slave trade also. I forget exactly when. We did not outlaw slavery as early as England did, but then there are other countries that outlawed slavery after we had. So,
Right.
but through the 1800s, you have slavery being outlawed through most of, at least the Anglosphere. You have slavery exist. Even today there are places that enslave other human beings, which is sad. Although technically there's no country in the world today, I don't think, where slavery is actually legal. But
But it
slavery
happens.
still
In
happens.
America, we have slaves. They have sex slaves. People, women and children are being trafficked. And that there's a big push to find those people. And actually,
Yeah.
if you want to know if someone's being trafficked based on their behavior, there are websites that you can educate yourself on how to identify someone who's being human trafficked. So, because they'll send off signals that something's not right, and most of us are not savvy enough to pick up on it. And then you can let the authorities know that there's someone that you suspect is being trafficked, and they can look into it.
But at least in the modern world, slavery is illegal, and so
Right.
that helps. Before the 1800s, slavery was legal most places and
Right.
accepted as the norm. Now we're outraged by it, and it is not the norm. And
Right.
that's a good thing. It's an improvement. Progress has
It's
been
an
made.
awareness thing, and the other thing is too, it's also a wealth thing. Countries of wealth have the time and the money to be able to think about other issues besides survival.
Subsistence.
Right, and you see that even just within a country, the people that are trying to survive are not thinking about pollution and worry about stuff like that. They're trying to figure out how to get their next meal.
And we're at 5 o'clock.
Oh, Tim said Maya Angelou, yes.
Yes.
And Tim said I was a slave, I was a kid. That's different.
Yeah, I had to mow the grass for my dad.
Yeah. So, okay. So, we have gone over time. By
Well, we
1
started
minute?
slightly late.
Okay,
too,
so we're
by
exactly
a minute
the
or
hour.
two.
So, A Mere Darkly Unbridled Inquiry is brought to you by Quartz Hill School of Theology and also Quartz Hill Community Church. If you're in the Antelope Valley and you would like to take classes in person, you can do that. You can also take classes online, whether you're in the AV or not, and you only have to pay for them if you want credit for them. The church is located at 51st Street West and Avenue K in Quartz Hill. If you live in the area and you're looking for a place to worship, come join us at 11 o'clock a.m. on Sunday mornings. We do live stream our services, so if you're unable to get to your own church, or if you live in another time zone and you want to go to church more than once in a day, you can join us on Facebook. Amira Darkley has its own Facebook page. Please join our page so that you know when we're on air, which is about 4 o'clock almost every Saturday. And then you can also join the church's Facebook page, and then it'll make it easier to get to the live stream services as well. So anyway, we hope to see you either online or in person, and we'll see you next Saturday with what topic?
I do not recall. It's at the top of the
We
Facebook
need like
page.
we need like a little
I need to
crew.
remember. Well, yes, it'd be nice if we had more volunteers.
Can you look on there fast?
No.
Oh,
So it's
Okay.
on the Facebook page.
it's on the
for
Facebook page. So we'll see you next week.
with something.
So yeah, we'll be here talking about something.
So
So have a good week.
bye.